Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Facebook Live with GAE. I am Lisa Morgan, a kindergarten teacher and the GAE president.
I am Carly Shaw. I'm a teacher in Fulton County, and I am the GAE Secretary Treasurer.
We have with us this evening Joe Fleming, who is our Director of Government Relations. And Sharon Doe, our Vice President, should be joining us in just a moment. And we also have a special guest this week, Representative Eric Allen. Welcome, Representative Allen. And first, thank you for joining us this evening. And tell us what educators need to know about what's happening in the General Assembly this year.
Well, thank you very much, Lisa, for having me. And as I said earlier, I apologize. I'm standing outside of another venue about to go into an event. So if there's background noise, I apologize in advance. And I found a nice little place to stand, but then it started raining. So we're back to where we started. But anyway, I want to thank you guys for inviting me today. And, most importantly, I want to thank you for all you do. Over the last few years have not been easy. But I do want you to know how much we appreciate each and every teacher for the work and sacrifice that you made. And some of you all have heard me talk before, but as a son of a retired teacher, I know firsthand, how much you pour into your communities and how much you pour into each child and your classroom. And so I appreciate that. I appreciate you having me tonight and, continue to serve in the capacity that you do. And know that I'm here to support it. So there are a few things that I want to discuss tonight, but I'm also going to make sure we leave time at the end for Q&A. So as I start, professionally I'm a healthcare administrator by profession, and mental health is something that's extremely important to me. So I'm going to start talking about some of the CRT bills that are moving through, but I have a different perspective than most when you think about those. And what I look at is you have a Black youth suicide rate right now that's doubled since 2014. Mm-hmm. And yes, some of this is due to COVID because we know that there were young people that lost family, lost parents, lost loved ones during COVID. But even before then, we were on a very ominous trajectory with this. And so you got to look at the other issues such as, racism and the fact that there are daily reminders for these kids and these communities that they're less than. And so why do I bring this up in this context? Well, it's because one of the issues of not addressing some of these issues when we talk about bills targeting curricula is that if we're attempting to sanitize our history from the truth, what will our kids think about themselves in society? So if you think about bills like HB 888, if they were to pass and we start to sanitize what our kids learn in school, how will they reconcile what they experience every day with the things that they're taught in the classroom? What would that do to their anxiety? What if they're not taught about their past and their heritage being honored in the right way, good, bad, and indifferent? So I guess it is, my concerns about those bills, and there are several of them. 888 is just one of 4 or 5 different CRT bills that are moving through the legislature. If we don't teach it, then I guess we feel like it doesn't exist. And if it doesn't exist, those kids who experience this every single day find themselves left out. And I think that is a huge concern that we have to think about. And there are a lot of other issues with these bills, such as the funding, the expense that would come with, sanitizing curriculum. But my biggest concern is making sure that we are, helping our teachers who are on the front line, deal with students who, let's be honest, a lot of times they're coming to schools and the only hot meal they get, the only positive interaction with an adult, the only access to libraries and material is in that school. The schools are a bedrock of our community. And if we start to strip the foundation from that bedrock, it's only going to exacerbate some of the issues that we have. So as I said, I really look at the CRT issue from a different lens. So we've got HB 888, which is out there right now. We've also got a couple of other bills that are moving in the House and Senate that address similar things. Let's see, it's HB 1084, SB 377, SB 375. So all of them have the CRT boogeyman, as I call it, in them, but with different degrees of enforcement. And what's unfortunate is some of them even have consequences that are including funding cuts, which is to me contradictory to wanting student success, to say that if we don't like what a teacher is teaching, a parent can file a complaint and a school can be stripped of funding. So they're very, very dangerous in those ways. And in the same line as the 888, there's SB 226, I believe it's 226 or 266. That's the library bill that would sanitize our libraries and require schools to adopt a complaint resolution process for parents if they complain about books that they don't like in a library. Now, this bill was in the Judiciary Non-Civil in the House, but was recommitted to a subcommittee. But there's also a companion bill in the House, HB 516, that is still active and can move at any point. So all these bills around critical race theory, the sanitization of materials, are all floating around the Capitol in some form or another. It's early. It's only week 3. We've got a long way to go, so we have to stay vigilant. And I know Lisa and Joe are on top of it. You guys have an A-plus government relations team at the Capitol. I always know where to find them. They're right by the shoe shine stand. You can't miss them. It's funny. Every advocate has a certain place they stand in the Capitol, and you gotta know where your people are. And I know I can find Joe by the shoe shine stand right between the House and the Senate just about any day. But we're gonna make sure we're following it and staying on top of those. Now, outside of the CRT bills, there are always oh, go ahead, Joe.
One thing I just want to point out also, and I know you're aware of it, but our members may not be aware of it. Some of these bills that are restricting and regulating speech pertaining to history and race also potentially include criminal charges against educators.
Yes.
There are a number of these bills that authorize the district attorneys to bring action. So we're very concerned, not only for financial penalties that school districts might take, but litigation that might occur that jeopardize
civil.
Well, I mean, GAEs do criminal. So
yeah.
I know in Will Wade's bill, HB 1048, the AGs are involved in the process. It doesn't spell out if it's a misdemeanor or a felony, but DAs do criminal charges. And I think you can certainly make a case that in all these bills, they potentially expose educators to litigation, discipline, loss of certification, all sorts of horrible things, even over as little as a misunderstanding.
Yeah, Joe, you brought up a good point, and I kind of glossed over it when I mentioned that 226 was actually heard in judiciary. That was my point. And I'm glad you said that, because under what circumstance would you have a bill that talks about library books in a judiciary committee? That tells you right there that there are penalties and some other things that are involved that are things to be concerned about. I can't recall anything that had to do with our education system being assigned to judiciary. So once again, we've got to watch out for those. The other areas that I'm being very vigilant about, and I'm glad your team are paying attention to, are the voucher bills. There's a slew of voucher bills that are moving around. There was one heard recently. I think there was one introduced today, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm trying to follow some of those. But every year, there's always a slew of these bills, and this year's no different. The one thing I'll say about these bills is that I firmly believe public funds should not be used for private education. That is to me a non-starter when you start looking at those on. And also, I don't know how many people if they were honest with themselves, are a voucher away from choosing to go to private school. All this would be is people who could already make the decision to go to private school to be able to get some relief from the money that they're paying. The kids that I know that are in schools that may want a different option are not $3,000 away from Lovett or Westminster. They're not. So it's kind of disingenuous on the face. The other part I would say is vouchers are really ripe for abuse, which will pull more and more funding out of our public school system. So I think we need to make sure that we're watching some of these voucher bills that are moving through. I'm not sure if any are going to be in committee this week or next, but I do know that they are moving. And as I said, we need to protect our public schools. And the one thing that I tell my constituents, and I represent, we didn't say this at the beginning, but I represent North Atlanta. So the two high schools that I'm most affiliated with are Campbell High School in Cobb and North Atlanta in Fulton, and everything in between in Vinings. The reality is that if you are wanting to talk about school choice, our public schools have to be a viable choice. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a lot of conversation around we need choice. Well, for 90% of Georgians, the school that's within walking distance is the only choice they have. And we can't abandon those in order to make people who can already make the decision to go anywhere else. So I said I wasn't going to give a lot of opinion, just kind of give fact, but I think it's very important that we talk about that with the voucher bills. And lastly, the big issue that I wanted to bring you guys up to speed on is the budget. The budget, for the most part, has a lot of positives. The governor has kept his promise on the $5,000 raise in the budget if it passes. And I'll tell you, the only thing that's really concerning to me is there's a lot of celebration around restoring the austerity cuts from the COVID years. I firmly believe that going back to pre-COVID funding is the starting point in which we should have been investing more in education, not to celebrate and stop. The governor announced that he's going to be using over $1 billion to give refunds, $250 for every taxpayer filing individually, $500 for joint filers. That $1.6 billion could easily go into, not only meeting the threshold of an antiquated QBE, but exceeding it and really investing in our teachers the way that they should. So those are really the highlights that I wanted to address. I mean, just personally, if there are any things that I can work on or work with you on, I had a teacher in my district come to me the other day with an idea of allowing people going into the education field, going into college, to be guaranteed hope at the Zell Miller level so they could come out debt free. Instead of worried about getting them more money, how about if I go into teaching, I come out of school debt free? I think those are the ideas that we should be looking at. So if there are any ideas that you guys have, my office is always open. Give them to Joe. I'll go by the shoe shine stand and pick them up. And if there are any questions, I'd love to stick around, Joe.
I just want to mention to our members that Eric is a real friend of education. He's on our honor roll list this year for his commitment to public education. He represents the Smyrna area of Cobb County. I guess a little bit of North Fulton too.
Fulton. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, North Atlanta, not North
okay,
Fulton.
North Atlanta. That's true. North Fulton's far away.
North Fulton's a whole different ball game.
But he is someone that is a real friend of education, and we're grateful to have members like that. I understand he has a campaign in his future. So if you happen to see his name on the ballot, I hope you'll give him strong consideration.
I appreciate that.
So, Representative Allen, I'm going to ask you Carly's question. Carly always asks this question, but I'm going to steal it from her tonight. So you said that you were a healthcare administrator. So why did you decide to run for the legislature? What made that important to you?
That's a great question. So I was working for the Department of Behavioral Health. So I was and I will say I'm the only legislator in the House or the Senate that has ever worked as an executive in state government. So I was literally working as an executive director of development for the Georgia Department of Behavioral Health, Developmental Disabilities. And I started to see so many of the gaps that we have in delivery of services. And my fundamental premise on government is we pay taxes so government provides services, whether that be education, library, road, sanitation, whatever it is. But Georgia, we have so many gaps in how we deliver those services. So I became one of those people that became a loudmouth, and people start saying, put up or shut up. And so I quit my job. There's a lot more to the story in the middle, but I left the department, ran for office, and never looked back. And it leads to kind of what Joe was talking about. One of the main reasons why I've decided to run for lieutenant governor is because that role is really a hybrid role between the government offices and how they provide services and the legislature. And there are so many things that we can do to improve everyday lives of Georgians without going through the legislative process. All we have to do is free up our government agencies to do their job, to be innovative, to be creative. And that even is the Department of Education. There's so much they can do to influence positively the educational experience, not only for teachers, but also students and families through administrative rule without having to do everything through the legislature. So that's why I ran. That's a great question. Thank you.
Thank you. So we know you have another engagement this evening. We'd like to truly thank you for joining us and giving us an update about what is happening. And we will certainly look forward to seeing you again. And thank you for joining us this evening.
And thank you anytime. Please invite me anytime. But y'all have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Bye now.
So there's a lot else going on in the General Assembly that we didn't have time to cover in that. As the representative said, there are at least 5 bills that would restrict the teaching of race, the language that's used. One of the bills that Representative Allen mentioned would cut funding for local districts by 20%. They would lose 20% of their QBE funding if they were found in violation of some of these acts. I mentioned the criminal acts that potentially could be facing educators. These are really dangerous bills. Not to mention even the fact that they have almost certainly will have a chilling effect on how teachers teach class, and that's a shame. But it seems to be the cultural war of the day, and it is aggressively being pushed in both chambers of the General Assembly. I did want to mention, Lisa, that we had 3 bills left over from last year regulating the transgendered athletes' participation in so-called girl sports. There were 3 from last year. They did not move last year, but there was a new one filed today again with the title "Save Our Girls Sports." So we've heard the possibility that maybe the legislative leaders aren't interested in these bills, but certainly members of their caucus are. And we'll be watching those bills very closely as well. The General Assembly is going to meet again tomorrow. I think even Representative Allen recognizes that tomorrow is they're in session, but there's not a whole lot on their calendar, and you will see committee hearings canceled as we get closer to tomorrow because a lot of them are anxious to get out of town. Next week, they're going to be in session Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Wednesday, they will be there because they'll be having committee meetings that day. And we expect that we will see movement on some of these bills that we've been talking about, vouchers being among them. So if you read our legislative report from yesterday, you know that 2 voucher bills advanced yesterday in the House of Representatives. One was passed out of the House Education Committee, HB 60. This is a bill that we defeated last year, thanks to our members and their grassroots calls and emails to legislators. It is a bill that significantly expands the amount of money that the state will spend subsidizing private school tuition. There is another bill by the same sponsor, House Bill 999, that goes where I think a lot of these pro-voucher advocates want to go to, and that is what we call universal. They're universal. Any student in Georgia could get them. Most of the most of the voucher programs in Georgia have been somewhat tied to 504 plans, IEP plans, medical disabilities. 999 opens the door for anybody. $6,000 a year to pay for a private school. And of course, who benefits from that? It's not poor families. That's not going to cover the amount of an education at some of these private schools. It's the wealthy families whose kids may already be in private school and are using this as an accounting trick to lower their tax burden and reduce their expenditures on their kids' private education. So really draconian and bad bills. Those could easily come up in committee or on the House floor next week. We did send out a legislative call to action, asking our members to contact their legislators about these bills and express their opposition. If you have not done so, please do so. I put the link in there for an archive of our legislative reports from the Capitol. Yesterday's, it says right there, a day to remember, and that's one to click on, link you to our grassroots page where you can send messages to your elected officials on these bills. We'll be sending out a reminder tomorrow as well, and then doing what we call a patch through phone program, where we connect our members by telephone with their representatives as well. So a lot going on. Yes, ma'am.
I put the direct link to where we want them to take that action. And Carly, it's like last year, it's 2 clicks, 2 clicks. I did put that link in the comments. So click the link, fill in your information, and click submit, and your representatives will then get the email telling them to vote no on vouchers. And some
of course, feel free to personalize the message a little bit, because we don't want them to think you're just 2 clicks away from sending an email. We do want them to know you are a person, you have an opinion, and you vote, and they better listen to you.
Yes, ma'am. And I've always said, once you do those 2 clicks to the people that represent you, go to your email program and send an email to those people that represent your school. They will listen as well. As many emails as we can get, as many phone calls as we can get. These voucher programs are not for the majority of our students, and they are not going to make things better in public education in Georgia.
You said before, it creates basically 2 separate school systems.
Yes.
And I'm in agreement with what Representative Allen said. We should not be using taxpayer dollars, state funds to pay for private school.
No. And, I thought about this today. The representative who was presenting this bill said that our public schools do a great job for 95% of students. So then, instead of taking funding away, why don't we invest additional funding so that we can do our constitutional obligation to meet the needs of those other 5%? It was interesting. Let me just say that.
He also made an argument that these private school voucher bills are good for public schools because they save us money, and that we actually profit from them. So this is a crazy season indeed, with some of these bills regulating speech and censorship and these voucher bills. It's something to watch.
And then they said for the people with 504s, IEPs, I know you mentioned that about the voucher bill, they wanted the students to come that had some considerations that they wanted with their education, and they go to these private schools, and the private schools don't meet their needs. And then they send the students back to public school because we do meet their needs. We do have services provided, and they've taken the money out of the public school already because the students started off in private school. So it's just a vicious cycle that is doing nothing more than taking money away from our classrooms in public school where we need the money because we're not fully funded.
Right. And Carly, Sharon, you all will know about this. One of the things that I spoke about yesterday is House Bill 999 says that the child is eligible for the voucher if they have attended public school for 6 weeks. And then if they accept the voucher, they are waiving their rights that they might have under IDEA or Section 504. Well, I'm pretty sure your school's like my school. If a child has special needs and we need to get them those services, it doesn't happen in 6 weeks. 6 weeks, we're just beginning the process. So these students are going to be there for 6 weeks. We begin the process. We're trying to get them the assistance they need. Oops, they're gone. And they're waiving their rights to ever receive the assistance they need. It's not, I'll just say it. It's not about the children. This is about parents who want a coupon. You're right, Carly, a coupon. And it's about those children who are already attending private schools. But the infuriating thing about it is they're trying to say it is about our students who live in poverty and that it is going to offer them a chance. You know, one of the things we've talked about for years is that our children who live in those circumstances, that the parents don't have transportation to take them to the private school. So now they can use, the bill says they can use $500 of the voucher to pay for transportation for their child. But if they're using the $500 of the voucher to pay for the transportation, they've still got to have that and now they need an additional $500 for the tuition. So you really haven't, you say you've addressed that problem, but in reality you haven't.
Yeah,
It's really about children who live in poverty. Why not make the bill exclusively for them? If you really want to get to the root of it. And what I think is important for parents to know is if you have a child with special needs in the public school system, we have to abide by those federal guidelines under IDEA. We have to provide those services for them. If you take them out of the public school system and take them to a private school system or a private school setting, then they are under no obligation to provide any of those services.
Yeah. But Sharon, not only are they under no obligation, the parent has waived their right to receive those services. So they're completely, you know.
And the catch is you can't get the voucher without signing the waiver to waive your rights for that.
Right. So I did put the link in the comments for the action alert. We want you to please do those emails. And like Carly said, if you've got a few minutes, we've got a message there, but add your little touch. Instead of saying, I live in your district, say, I'm Lisa Morgan. I am a kindergarten teacher. I live in your district. I teach at this school. Personalize it a little bit so they will pay attention. We know they're going, and the subject line, change the subject line just a little bit so it doesn't look the same. But the thing is, if they get 200 emails, they've gotten 200 emails and they know it's important. And that's what we want to happen. Our legislators need to understand that this is not good for our public schools and this is not good for our students.
Lisa, might be a good time for a commercial on the LCT.
Yeah, Joe, yes, it would be. So our legislative contact team is a group of members who simply have said, I am willing to contact my representatives about issues concerning public education. So I am putting the link to our next work session in the chat. Sign up, join us that evening. And when you join the legislative contact team, we're just asking you to say, I will call them, I will email them, and we will give you the talking points. We'll give you the information, what the bill is about. So when you're having that conversation, you will know House Bill 60 is a voucher bill. We oppose vouchers because it takes funds from public education. You'll have everything laid out there in front of you, not a script, because we want you to use your own words, but it will be there. And our next session for the legislative contact team is next Thursday, February 10th. And I'm sure we will have several things we're wanting to be contacting our legislators about that evening. So there, and Joe, I'm going to go ahead and do the commercial and put the registration for our GAE Day at the Capitol, because we want legislators to see educators there up close and personal, GAE Day at the Capitol. So you can interact with your representative, and so they can hear from the faces on the front line. I know when I speak, I identify myself as a teacher, but we need our teachers who are, and our paraprofessionals, our bus drivers, our cafeteria workers who are doing the work every day there. So they hear it from the source. So Joe, you told us about the things that have come, the ugly stuff.
Well, we got more.
Oh, we got more. Okay, well,
You
all
wanna hear
right. I just go, okay, go ahead and tell us the rest of it.
We have a bill in the Senate that would eliminate proof of vaccinations as a condition for entering a school or enrolling in a school. And we're not just talking about COVID, we're talking about all the vaccinations that are required now: polio, tuberculosis, diphtheria. Under the bill that was introduced by the senator from Chickamauga, you would no longer have to have those vaccinations or show proof that your child had them to gain entry into school. That goes into the crazy pile as well. We've got a lot of gun bills at the General Assembly. Normally we don't get involved in those, but we are monitoring those closely to the extent they would impact school safety zones and the safety of our students and educators. I will say one good bill that we're going to be working on, we've talked a little bit about it. You know, we all recognize there's a shortage of educators in the state at almost every position level. There is a bill, House Bill 385, which we have supported, that would allow retired teachers to return to the classroom full time, but the bill requires them to wait 1 year after retirement, but it would allow them to go back full time, drawing the benefits and salary. We think it's a pretty reasonable bill to address subject need areas, shortages in subject areas, by returning really well qualified teachers to the classroom. Unfortunately, in committee, they limited that pool to only those who have had 30 years of creditable service. That bill has passed the House and will go to the Senate. We're going to be working to undo that amendment and have a broader applicability. You know, if we are really serious about teacher shortages, educator shortages in Georgia, this bill is handicapping itself from being effective by limiting it just to those with 30 years of experience. So that's another bill. that we're following pretty closely. And we've been following the Senator Dixon's efforts on the school board in Gwinnett County to make the races there nonpartisan. Normally we would support that, but this seems such a transparent partisan act in Gwinnett County by the majority party to hold on to the last gasp of the power they have there. That bill actually did pass today and will go to the Senate, but there are actually hundreds of local pieces of legislation that redraw lines for school districts. Some that we're analyzing now may be moving their races to nonpartisan. I don't know. We'll see. We're not against nonpartisan races. It's just in the case of Gwinnett, the motive is pretty clear, and it's not a healthy motive. So there's a lot going on down there as well. In the budget, Representative Allen talked about some of the good things in there, the bonuses in there. That is in this fiscal year's budget. Every year there are two budgets before the General Assembly. One makes adjustments to the current year budget. That's where the bonus would be. We are looking for clarification to make sure as many of our members are included as possible. And then in the next year's fiscal budget is the $2,000 pay raise for teachers. To his credit, the governor fully funds QBE and restores all the budget cuts that were initially made to public education this year. But we do have to remind ourselves constantly that fully funding QBE does not necessarily translate into an adequate funding. As Lisa's pointed out, it's the Quality Basic Education Act, and it's good that it's fully funded. It's only happened twice in the last 20 years, but that is in no way funding the kind of education we need for a quality education in Georgia. So that's something else that we're following in the budget process, and there will be more hearings next week on that as well.
Yeah. I want to share with Carly and Sharon and everybody that's watching the data that we uncovered today about teacher salaries in Georgia and the starting teacher salary. And I'm going to make sure I've got this number right before I say it. But I remember the second number. So they analyzed teacher salaries and compared them to other professionals with similar education and years of experience. And for every dollar that a professional in another profession makes, an educator, a teacher makes 75 cents.
Yep. That sounds about right.
Yep. And then when we compared the average teacher salary to all the average beginning teacher salary to all the other states, we are 32nd. So if we really want to deal with the teacher shortage, and I think the teacher shortage is probably going to be getting worse over the next few years. It's not all about pay. But pay is where we start. If you feel like you are underpaid, then all the other issues just kind of pile on. If you feel like you're adequately compensated, then some of the other things you can deal with it a little bit. So that's where we are with pay. And okay, Joe, so I was kind of surprised that the session is going to go until April 4th, since it is an election year.
Yeah.
Can that calendar change? How likely is that to happen?
I would say unlikely, but not impossible. I mean, it only requires a 50% vote of each chamber in agreement on a new calendar. They don't have to go 40 days. They're allowed up to 40, what we call legislative days. Those are not necessarily consecutive days on the calendar, but 40 days in which they meet. It could change. At this point, it may be too early to think it would change, but you raise a point, and just politically motivated, the members of the General Assembly cannot raise money for their campaigns as it should be during the while they're in session. So there probably is some pressure from some legislators who are running for statewide office or for Congress or even for the state legislature, so they can get out and start campaigning for re-election. This is an important campaign year. I mean, let's think about what's on the ballot, going beyond just the question of the calendar. Senator Warnock is up for election again. I know he was just up, but he was filling the unexpired term of former Senator Johnny Isakson. So he's now running for his first full term. All statewide offices are on the ballot. You've got the governor's race. You've got school superintendent race will be on the ballot. Commissioner of Agriculture, Commissioner of Insurance, Commissioner of Labor, Attorney General is a very important race, Secretary of State. So once the session's over, we enter a whole new phase, an important phase for us, and that is supporting people who've supported us as Friends of Education, and electing people to the General Assembly that will stand with us on some of these key issues that we've talked about tonight. So, but because of the calendar, they cannot raise money until the session's over. Now, if they have a challenger who is not in elective office right now, they can raise as much as they want during the session. So you can understand why some of those in the General Assembly will want the session to end quickly, so they can get back to being competitive in fundraising. But we've got exciting plans for the campaign season, and look forward to an aggressive campaign to support those that support us at GAE and public education, and to defeat those who are obstacles to our agenda. So stay tuned and be a part of that.
Joe, that kind of leads in. Let's, I know, Carly, you're local president. Sharon, you're a past local president. And so our local presidents play a real key piece in that process that some people, I've heard it before, GAE just endorses people of a certain party. And that is not true. We endorse people in any party as long as they support public education. And those recommendations are made through our local associations, interviewing the candidates. And I know, Carly, you got to do that last time.
I sure did.
2020. And Sharon, I think you've done that before. Okay. So that will be happening after qualifying, once we know who the candidates are. Because,
and it's important to say that we do give a questionnaire for every single candidate who has qualified to fill out. And once they fill that out, then we move forward with the process. Yeah. And that is a very tedious process. It really is very involved, because we want to choose and select the best friend of education that we can when we are providing our support and our, not just financial, but our name put with their name. I mean, if we're going to say we endorse this candidate, we need to know that they've got our back.
Right.
That's very important.
You're right, it is. And that's one thing. If you have more questions about specifically how that process works, we will have an article in our No magazine to outline it, tell you every step of the process, how it works. Because I know we have people who support public education from both parties. When the voucher bill was voted on yesterday in committee, there were people from both parties who voted against that voucher bill.
That's a great point, Lisa. Yeah.
So, it's, as it says on our Red for Ed little logo, it's not the R, it's not the D, it's about the E. And that's the education of our students. I want to do another quick commercial. We do have 2 more sessions that I want to let everybody else know about. Next Tuesday, there is an NEA member benefits student debt informational session. So everyone that has those student loans, we know that as of now, beginning in May, people will begin paying back their student loans. So this is a session to talk about that process. And also we had a guest a couple of weeks ago who was able to get their student loans forgiven through the NEA member benefits program. So NEA member benefits are your benefits, so the benefit of being a member. And if they can help you get your student loans forgiven, that's like more than your dues for years and years and years. Thought about that. Let's see, Emily's, remember she told us that she got about $20,000 forgiven. So that's about 35 years full of dues that basically her dues are paid for those 35 years for what she's not paying in student loans. That's a pretty good deal. The other session I want to talk about, it is now February, and that means one thing in public schools, and that is teacher contracts. Seems like earlier and earlier every year, they issue contracts for the following year. And early and earlier every year, they're saying, we need you to sign your contract for next year. So we do have a Rights at Night session coming up on February 22nd at 6:30. And we will be talking about what we need to do when we receive that contract, and what you need. First thing, everybody read your contract, but also what it means to sign the contract, how long we have to sign the contract, all of that information that you need to have before the contract is issued from your school system. So, Carly, they haven't sent them out yet, right? No.
I haven't received mine yet, no.
Okay. Because last year I was like, oh, it's early, it's coming soon. And then all of a sudden we got a whole bunch of messages. Sharon, have they issued them for you all yet? No. Okay. So it will be February 22nd. So hopefully we can get the information for our members before those contracts are issued. Sharon, you're quiet tonight.
I'm so tired today. I'm tired. We had a rocket build, and I worked mainly with the middle school students today. And
They wore you out, huh?
yes, they did.
I can relate.
Yes, they did. Our club days are Wednesdays. And so, yes, pretty tired today. We had a rocket build today, so. More to come. I'm just happy to be alive.
I think so many of our teachers are just exhausted. This has been an interesting year. And so many of us are coming home just absolutely exhausted.
Yeah.
I mean, you fall asleep on the couch and then it's time to get up and go to bed. It's not every day, but it is happening more often this year than I remember it happening in previous years. So
And we're the only school in my area that does non-kit rocketry. We make all of our materials from scratch. We don't order any kits or anything like that. We assemble the rockets from raw materials. We make the nose cones. We use the paper towel rolls, toilet paper rolls, bunch of glue, just raw stuff that we put together.
Well, one of the reasons you may be so tired is that your school system has waivers for duty-free lunch and class size. So you're teaching more kids than ever with less planning and preparation and personal time than ever, which I did want to give just a short update on where we are on our waiver bill.
Well, the less planning time, yes, because we're on a just-in-case coverage plan. Since we have a shortage of subs coming into the building, like at any given time, we could have 6 to 8 teachers out, and we're already a small staff because I teach at a magnet school. And so when we only have 1 sub coming in and 7 teachers out, we have to cover each other's classes. And so there are some weeks that we don't have a planning period.
Yeah. Well, as hopefully everyone knows, one of the things that GAE is leading the way on is reform from the school district waivers. If you're not familiar, just briefly, the General Assembly gave powers to the local school districts to apply for exemptions from pretty much any state law pertaining to public education. And they do. They apply for these. They're called waivers. Really all a school district has to do is submit just basic information saying we want to waive. We don't want to have to follow the laws about maximum number of students in the classroom. And the Department of Education grants those waivers. So it is, as a result of that, almost every school in Georgia has no cap on the number of students they can have in the classroom. And we're seeing class sizes grow. And among the other things that they waive are duty-free lunch. And they waive these teachers' salary step schedule. So it is possible that the governor's raise comes down and goes through and it's diverted for some other use. I mean, that could happen for a district that has a waiver from the salary step schedule. So we're leading the way to reform that. We have a bill in the House, HB 518. We're adding additional sponsors next week. We think we have a Senate sponsor lined up to introduce in the Senate. And at least and I were talking today, we're beginning to see more and more discussion of waivers showing up in bills and showing up in education discussions. And I honestly believe that's because we've been talking about it as much as we could. We don't have a conversation at the Capitol without talking about the need to reform waivers. And in fact, waivers are a significant part of one of these bills on race. It kind of uses it in a weird way. It penalizes the school by taking away some of the waivers they have. But I think it's further proof that we are beginning to get through a little bit and people are beginning to understand, that these waivers exist and what they mean and what they do and the harm that they're causing students and teachers and schools.
I have to be
I
honest here.
absolutely understand that the laws are made at the Capitol, but having a conversation with the administration in your building, I think that's important to how those laws are implemented within your building. Because when it came to class size, I absolutely had a conversation with the administration in my building because I teach a science class and we're required by state law to have lab be 26% of our class time of our curriculum. And there's no way that I can effectively monitor or supervise a large number of kids in a physics class using real equipment. And so what the district did, they purchased online labs where the students get to manipulate things. It's not like manipulating the equipment, firsthand, but they can still see the same effects, the same results, online electronically. And that kind of, it really helps with the safety issue when it comes to monitoring kids and when it comes to the spread of COVID as well, the social distancing.
So you just mentioned something, Sharon, that I was going to mention. I'm confused about some of these bills and some of these things that are coming up about the curriculum, because we don't get to pick what curriculum we teach. It is decided by the state, and they give us the curriculum that we teach. Now, our county may be able to alter when we teach what specific part of the curriculum, but the standards are Georgia-based. They're set by the state. So for someone to say that we can't teach something specific unless it's in our standards, I don't know many teachers that have time to meet all of the standards anyway, and they're certainly not adding extra stuff until they've met the standards that our students are going to be tested over. So I'm just confused about all this discussion about things being added to the standards that we're not adding.
Carly,
Yes.
our word for the day is disinformation. And that's what it is. I actually pulled out, we talked about contracts. I pulled out my contract from last year. And once you get through the front where it has all this about they might pay us if they have the money, or they might reduce the pay, or all this about my pay, and you turn it over, the first sentence, it says that the employee agrees to teach the DeKalb County curriculum as adopted by the school board. So the state adopts the standards, and then our school district adopts their curriculum, and we literally sign that as a condition of employment, we're going to teach that curriculum.
Exactly.
But we have people who have an agenda that is anti-public education, and they are spreading the disinformation about what we're actually doing in our classrooms.
Oh, well, surprise, surprise.
Yeah. And it is, I find the whole, quote, divisive concepts, language, quite interesting, because the most divisive thing about it is that it is trying to divide the parent-teacher partnership where we work together for our students. So the most divisive thing happening is in the bill and the impact they're trying to have on educators and parents. And then also the tattletale part of it, because the bills actually encourage educators to report other educators.
Wow.
Why? And that's one of those things, we always work together as a team to do our lesson plans.
Still do.
That was, now, would I tweak something a little bit? Yeah. Probably, yeah. Because I was known as the singing kindergarten teacher. I had a song for everything, okay? I had a song for everything. So everybody would be like, okay, Morgan, what song are you going to sing? And well, we're going to sing this song. And nobody else sang my songs, but that was, I did. Because your personality comes in your classroom. We all know that.
Absolutely.
But that's not the same as saying that we are teaching lessons in a way to harm our students. Yeah. Okay, y'all, our hour has flown by. It is time for us to say good evening to everyone. We would ask you to look in the comments and send your email to your representatives, asking them to vote no on vouchers. And join us. We will be back in 2 weeks and we will have more guests. And I'm sure by then we will have much more to talk about at the legislature. And join us for our legislative contact team work session next Thursday. And check every day your email for your legislative alerts, because we will keep you up to date each and every day. And everyone have a good week. We'll see you February 16th. Same time, same place.